Hello, I am Nicole Dyer of FamilyLocket.com, and I'm going to tell you about how to review the accuracy of your family tree when you're trying to find names for the temple. This is a very important first step. So before we get started on that, I want to put a plug in for my book, Find Names for the Temple, a step-by-step method for success. And it takes you through every step in the process for how to find names for the temple, especially if you have a full tree and you have a lot of early Mormon ancestors. It can be difficult to know where to start. So check out the book. You can buy it on Amazon.com. I'm going to talk in this video about the first chapter, review the accuracy of your tree, and how to make sure that you're not barking up the wrong tree. In Doctrine and Covenants 128:24, it says, "Let us present in his holy temple, when it is finished, a book containing the records of our dead, which shall be worthy of all acceptation." And I think this is important because we don't want to present a family tree that has errors and that has the incorrect links between parents and children. And we know that this is a really important part of the gospel and of sealing, so we want to make sure we do our best. And we can do our best by learning how to do this. So I'm going to teach you guys how to do this. All right, so what you need to remember in this step is that the Family Search family tree, where you reserve temple work, is a collaborative tree. And that means a lot of other people are adding their information and making changes. And you'll have relatives in common with other people who will go and change your common ancestors. And a lot of the time this will be good. They'll add pictures, they'll add stories, and other times they might add things that are incorrect or that you don't know if they are correct. So you need to go and review their conclusions and see if you agree. So we're going to talk today about how to review other contributors' conclusions in the tree. And one really important reason to do this is from an example from my friend. And she was trying to find names for the temple quickly, and so she used the Take a Name app, which is a great app for finding places to start your research. But before you take the names to the temple, you should review the accuracy first. So she didn't review the accuracy. She printed out all the names that she found with the app, and then she took the cards to the baptistry. And one of the cards was for a female, but the name said Abraham Hope. So the baptistry leaders there gave it back and said, "You can't use this because this is clearly a man's name, but the gender is female." So she hadn't reviewed the accuracy of that, and so she couldn't do the work. And the work wasn't needed. The male version of Abraham Hope had already had his work done. So that's a really important reason also to review the accuracy, is we don't want to duplicate temple work. That's why we have Family Search. That's why we have the website showing us what work has already been done. So when you get started with reviewing your tree, one thing that you can do that I did was to print out your fan chart. And if you print it out on Family Search, it will be 7 generations rather than 5. And you can review all of the relationships between you and the ancestors in the outer ring. And you can start with yourself, and then you can go out. And as you know that these people are your ancestors, or you don't know, you can put checks or question marks, or you can make notes. So what you're looking for or trying to remember is if you've heard your parents talk about that relative and they remember them, like my mom remembers her great-great-grandmother, and she had heard stories about her from her mom. So that is a person that is confirmed by memory. So someone we know remembers them. But once you get back to a name that you don't recognize and your family doesn't recognize, they don't remember, then you need to check sources. So this is the process that we do. It's reviewing each ancestral relationship, the parent-child relationship. We want to make sure that the relationship between your great-grandmother and your great-great-grandmother is a correct link. So check off the ancestors that you know personally or someone in your family knew, and then review the ones that you don't know personally by looking at their sources and look at the image for each source. So it's not okay just to look at the census transcription, but you want to see also the actual census image because the handwriting can sometimes be hard to read for someone who's not familiar with what they're looking for. So you are looking for specific evidence confirming a child to a parent when you look at that census. And a census will sometimes say that a person is the daughter or the son of the head of household, but sometimes in the earlier censuses from 1850 to 1870, and this is in the United States, the census didn't say the relationship between everyone in the household, it just lists all the names. So be aware that sometimes the census won't tell you the relationship, and but it can be, partial or indirect evidence, but it's not direct evidence of a parent-child relationship unless it directly states that it's a son or daughter in the relationship column from 1880 on in those census years. All right, so I'm going to show you guys how to do this. We're going to use the example of my great-great-grandmother, Alice Fraser, and we're going to try to confirm if her parents really are Richard Fraser and Nancy Elizabeth Briscoe, as the Family Search family tree shows. So we're going to look at the sources of her and her parents and siblings to see if these sources show that this parent-child relationship is correct. And then if it does, we'll go ahead and put a check mark on the fan chart for Alice Fraser and her parents. And then we can go back another generation. And then after that, we'll be ready to do some descendancy research and find more relatives and cousins of Alice and Nancy and Richard to find if we have any temple work that needs to be done. So let's go forward and find the next step. Okay, here's my family tree, and here is my great-grandmother, Ettie Bell Harris. So I recognize that name, although I didn't know her personally. I know of her from stories from my mother and my grandpa. She died when she was about 50, so my mom didn't actually know her either, but her dad told her about her. So I know that my relationship to Ettie Bell Harris is confirmed through the memory of my mother and grandfather. And I also am confident that her parents are correct because we have pictures of them and we know that they were a family unit through family memories. So the pictures that my mom has of them all together are pretty good evidence. But the next generation, I'm not so sure. Richard Fraser and Nancy Elizabeth Briscoe, their names are not familiar to me. So before I do any more research on their ancestors or their other descendants, I want to make sure that I know this relationship between Alice and her parents is correct, just to make sure. So to review the accuracy of this parent-child relationship, I'm going to look at all the sources of Alice and her parents and her siblings. So let's start with Alice. So we click her name and then go to her person page. And let's see what sources are already available about Alice. All right, so if you click on this, you can go to the sources section quickly. And here I see that there are 4 censuses that she appeared on. And in the 1910, 1900 censuses, let's see, the 1900 census, she appears with Richard Fraser, but the other 3, she appears with her husband, Doc Harris. So I want to look at the parent-child relationship, so I'm most interested in the 1900 census because it shows her in the household with Richard Fraser, who is supposedly her father, and that's what I'm trying to confirm. So we can look at the transcription down below, and it says the household contained the head, Richard Fraser, and his wife, Nancy, and a daughter named Alice. So that's good evidence that Alice's parents are Richard and Nancy, but it doesn't say Nancy's maiden name. So I want to confirm that Briscoe is the correct maiden name for Nancy Elizabeth Briscoe. So how do we find a source that says a maiden name? Well, often death certificates will tell the maiden name of a person's mother. So let's check and see if Alice Fraser has a death certificate. Here is a death index record. Let's see what this says. This is for Alice's daughter, Ettie Bell, and it says that her mother's maiden name was Fraser, but it doesn't say Alice's mother's maiden name. So let's look at some of the other sources. These are all census records, and they're not going to say Alice's mother's maiden name. Why don't we look and see if any of Alice's siblings or her parents have sources that tell her maiden name? So Nancy Briscoe has 11 sources. Let's check there first. So let's go to her person page and go down to the sources. And you can see we have a lot of census records. The first one is a census of Nancy Briscoe in the household of John Briscoe. And that's pretty good evidence that our Nancy is the same as Nancy Briscoe. But how do we know for sure? we need a death certificate that connects this family all together. So here we have a death record for W.C. Frazier. And this is a death certificate for W.C. Frazier, whose father's name was Richard Frazier and mother's name was Nancy Briscoe. So we can open this in a new tab to see the image of the death certificate and see what it tells us on the actual image. And as we can see, there is a section for the name of the father, Richard Frazier, and name of the mother, maiden name, Nancy Briscoe. So who is this W.C. Frazier? It looks like it's attached to William Calloway Frazier. And Diana Elder has attached this as a source for Nancy Briscoe because the mother is listed on her son's death certificate. Great. So now we know that Alice Frazier and her brother, William Calloway Frazier, are children of Nancy Elizabeth Briscoe, and we know that that's her maiden name. We have to use two pieces of indirect evidence to conclude that Alice is the daughter of Nancy Elizabeth Briscoe because we don't have her death certificate, but we know that Alice is the brother of William, right? Because we saw them on the census together. Let's review that. So we looked at Alice's census record, and it was here in the 1900 census. And let's see, is William here? It says Milliard. Let's check the actual image to see what it says. Let's see, where are the Fraziers on this page? Okay, here's the household of Richard Frazier and Nancy E. Briscoe, we know, Frazier. And here's their son. It looks like his name could be read either William or Milliard. But I'm going to go ahead and go with William because we know that that's his name based on other sources that are in the family tree. Let's go ahead and look at William person. Okay, so in the 1880 census, he's listed with Richard Frazier and Nancy, and his name is listed as William and not Milliard. All right, great. So now we can go back to Alice and we can say that we have proved and confirmed that her parents are Richard Frazier and Nancy Briscoe because she appears on the 1900 census in their household here, and her brother William has a death certificate that shows his mother's maiden name is Nancy Elizabeth Briscoe. So now when I look at my family tree, I can be certain that I can keep looking for ancestors of Richard Frazier and Nancy Briscoe, and they will be my relatives because I've confirmed this relationship from my great-grandmother to her mother to Alice's parents. So my next step will be to review the relationship between Richard Frazier and his parents and Nancy Elizabeth Briscoe and her parents. Okay, let's review the evidence that we found that proved the relationship we were looking for. Number one, we found the 1900 census that showed Alice Frazier as a daughter, not just as a household member, but as a daughter of Richard and Nancy. And this seems to match what we found in Family Search, in the tree. All the siblings were there, including William. And next, we needed to find the maiden name for Nancy. We needed a source for that because we didn't know if Briscoe was correct. We hadn't seen that on a source. So we checked the sources for Nancy Briscoe and found a death record for one of her sons, Alice's brother, William Calloway Frazier, also known as W.C. Frazier, in which the mother is listed as Nancy Briscoe. So now we have an original source with direct evidence that Nancy's maiden name is Briscoe. And we know that William and Alice are siblings from the 1900 census, which gave us direct evidence that their parents were Richard and Nancy. So now we have confirmed the relationship of Alice to her parents. Now, what if you try to do this process and you come across an ancestor who has no sources attached to them in the family tree? This will happen to you sometimes, and this can happen for several reasons. If there's no sources attached, then it could be a clue that they haven't been thoroughly researched, and you can use them as a starting point for a research project. And we'll talk about that in part 4 of the series. And if they were shared on Family Search but no sources were added, maybe somebody researched them in a different place and put all the information on their Roots Magic program at home but didn't upload it to Family Tree, then that can be another reason why there's no sources listed. So you need to either contact the Family Search user who added that person and ask where they got their information from, or look on some of the other family tree sharing sites like Ancestry, MyHeritage, WikiTree, RootsWeb, Find My Past, etc. And if you can't find any evidence or sources about this person, then that's a clue that you need to do a research project to find out more about them. And you can do that by going to part 4 of this series. So thank you for watching today about how to review the accuracy of your tree, which is the first step in finding names for the temple. And if you have already found a name for the temple that needs work, you can do this process to check each parent-child relationship in your tree leading to the person who needs temple work. And if they're a cousin, you just go up your tree to the ancestor and then back down, confirming all the relationships in between. And then if you've found sources for all of those relationships, you can safely do the temple work for that person, knowing that they are your ancestor or your cousin or your relative. So good luck. If you want more help, check out our articles at familylocket.com. I'll be posting one every week about how to find names for the temple, and they correspond with each chapter in the book. So if you're just ready to have the whole process right now, go ahead and go to amazon.com and you can buy the book Find Names for the Temple, a step-by-step method for success. So that was written by myself, Nicole Dyer, and my mother, who edited and reviewed it, Diana Elder, AG, which is accredited genealogist, and that's a credential meaning a professional genealogist. So she knows her stuff. Anyway, so if you're interested in that, go check it out on Amazon, and it comes in an ebook form and also a print book form, like I showed you before. It's a handy little guide, not very long. It tells you all the steps that you need to do to find names for the temple, especially if you have a full tree, which I know is a big problem for a lot of people who want to find names. So good luck, and you can do it, and I hope that you have a good time while you're at it. Bye-bye for now.